Winston Churchill once said, even describing the kinds of people that go into politics, he said there are those that give up their principles to join parties. And he said, on the other hand, there's also a group that leave the party to pick up their principles again. I'm one of those. I left the party after 30-some odd years, and I decided that I had to recover my principles or lose total interest in politics. I think when we remind ourselves back in 2008, when we had a candidate brought to us from Mill Woods who lost two nominations on 2 elections, and we were to use him as our MP, and every effort was made all the way from the top down to get him elected. I think that that was a pretty tough thing, and when the board resigned, we knew we had lots of problems and lots of morality problems. I also thought that when we lost our principal was allowing our MP for 7 years to live totally in Ottawa and not live with us, and to have his family go there, and his wife serve as a full-time justice lawyer in Ottawa. I found that a tough thing to accept, and I'm sorry that that's, I'll never give that up. I think that we were cheated, but on the other hand, we shouldn't have voted them in. I guess it was our blind loyalty to the Conservative Party that we overlooked some of the terrible things that have been done in the past. And I just hope that people will start looking at independence if they can't, if they have trouble thinking of how they don't want to vote against their Conservative Party in some senses, but if they vote for an independent, maybe they feel a little better. You know, we used to have a lot of independents in Canada and in other parts of the world. In fact, this year, we've never had so many. There are 14 independent candidates in Alberta this time. There are 28 independent candidates in Ontario, and there are 74 independent candidates running in this election in Canada to this day. So, I mean, I think we're starting to see the light. And I think the other part of that is that if we have a minority government, and goodness knows what's going to happen, the strategic thing to do is to have someone there that can be more attractive to the whatever party wins to use as a vote, and for that independent candidate to be able to speak out on issues that are pertinent to his or her riding, and be able to possibly persuade the others to support whatever bill that they would like to bring forward. I also want to point out that one of the things that has happened here is that we've had vote buying at the highest order. I mean, in every respect, we've had nothing but, and that's principles knocked to pieces. We have, you know it, and I know it, we see it from time to time. Almost every issue, every bill, every discussion, every action is predicated with the idea that they've got to win this election. And I think that one of the problems we have is we're not getting local formation, we're not getting focus, we're not getting the things that we want. For example, Calgary, Mr. Harper's riding area, got a $1.7 billion grant for their LRT. The capital region, which we're part of, we got 0. I'm not sure why that happened, except it might be that we're creeping NDPers in this region, and maybe we should be taught a lesson. I don't know. But that's speculation on my part. The point is, we didn't get any of that money. Why should we be loyal to someone who doesn't give us some of the money? We have $500 million coming out of Alberta into the Ottawa coffers. We get very, very little of that back. And I think it's time we've got someone who will stand up in the House, not be muffled by the caucus, but be able to stand there and say something. Thank you.
Tonight I stand in the heartland, and the heartland is oil, so that is where I'm going to begin. The Green Party wants to refine our oil here and try and get our Alberta boys back to work as soon as possible, versus shipping our jobs away via environmentally risky pipelines. Unfortunately, Harrop caved to industry, resulting in Alberta only getting 1 upgrader versus 6, which puts us in a hard spot, but not an impossible one. There are 4 proposed pipelines that Harrop has been unable to get through for 11 years due to opposition. The Green Party also opposes them, but not because we oppose pipelines. If we're going to do oil, pipelines are the safest way to ship it. We're opposed to the shipping of the raw bitumen. And the shipping of the raw bitumen is the same reason the pipeline plan has failed for 11 years. The raw bitumen cannot be cleaned up, especially if it hits water. Energy East will go over and around 219 bodies of water. A spill into any one of them will write them off forever. The Kinder Morgan and Northern Gateway both go directly to the ocean. Due to the thick heaviness of the bitumen, a spill off our coastline will sink to the bottom of the ocean, and again, it cannot be cleaned up. This will crash the BC fisheries and tourism, and those jobs have just as much right to be protected as our oil jobs. There is being supportive of industry, and then there is being environmentally irresponsible for all future generations. We will always need energy. We just need to find a way to support our industry in a sustainable manner, as all future generations will have to live here regardless of the condition we leave the country in. We also need to diversify to get us ready for the future of energy. The move of shutting down coal-fired electricity plants and transitioning that market to renewables created over 260,000 jobs in California. That is what we need in Alberta. More jobs. Real long-term jobs. They are forecasting a reduction in emissions by 80% by 2050. This is a great place to start tackling climate change without harming our main industry and getting us set up for the future. Another item that I want to make sure to mention is the Green Party's plan to take 1% of the GST and direct it back to the municipalities for infrastructure. Due to cuts, Canada is sitting on a $123 billion infrastructure deficit. Putting in infrastructure creates jobs, lots of jobs over a wide range of fields. When people have jobs, they have money to spend, and the spending of that money recovers the economy. If I can pull off this 1% GST to municipalities, that would mean a new bridge for Fort Saskatchewan. We have waited 12 years to get this bridge we so desperately need, and making that happen is one of my main goals for the local level of this area. We have many great policies in our Vision Green and in our election platform, which I invite you all to read. It is fully costed, fully explained, fully transparent platform, complete with a 4-year budget. The Green Party of Canada believes that every Canadian deserves all the information to make an informed decision. Here is Vision Green. It is a 182-page document that covers our position on absolutely everything you can imagine. It is, however, overridden by the Green Party Constitution that states, I am expected to vote the way you want me to vote every time, regardless of the Green Party position. This allows for real representation and real democracy. MPs for the other parties will get thrown out of their party if they go against party lines to represent you. I will get thrown out if I don't represent you. The zero whipped votes and real representation is the only firm binding Green Party policy in our platform. So if you want policies that make sense, real representation, real democracy, and to have a say in your future, get back our sovereignty with a very passionate, driven candidate that believes in hard work to do a good job for you. Vote Brandie Harrop for the Green Party of Canada on October 19th.
Now, we're having this debate here in Fort Saskatchewan. Those of us who live here, as well as who come from surrounding parts of Strathcona County, know how much this community depends on a strong energy sector. About 20% of our provincial budget comes from energy royalties. Now, that's just royalties, never mind the taxes that employers and workers pay. In other provinces, people pay higher taxes and get less spending on public services. We are different here because we are blessed with energy resources, and crucially, because we have had the wisdom to develop them in a responsible way. The public services, the jobs and the opportunity, the quality of life that we have in this community are significantly supported by a strong energy sector. Now, this is a very important election. Our quality of life is in your hands as you make this choice. Which party forms government will affect us in concrete ways for generations to come. Now, our party strongly supports the development of our energy sector, as well as crucial pipeline projects such as Northern Gateway. I am also proud to say that in our last budget, we introduced major new tax incentives to encourage more refining and upgrading right here in our industrial heartland, a move praised by the Alberta Industrial Heartland Association. They said, and I quote, "The program provides long-term certainty and helps boost Canada's global competitiveness to attract new investment." That is exactly what we need, isn't it? Long-term certainty and competitiveness. But a strong economy doesn't emerge without these things, without economic certainty and competitiveness. We've seen in other provinces, under other governments, decades of failure to develop natural resources and a failure to grow the economy or invest in public services as a result. Now, in this election, we know that the other parties take a very different approach when it comes to supporting our energy sector, and I think it is important to review the record on that. A prominent star NDP candidate in Toronto, Linda McQuaig, said early on in the election that most of our energy resources may have to stay in the ground. And our local NDP candidate said about those remarks, "My reaction was one of surprise, not because she said it, but because it's true." So the fact of the matter is we know where the NDP stand. But let's be clear that the Liberal position is not substantially different. The Liberals oppose vital pipeline projects like Northern Gateway, and their leader has called for a ban on tanker traffic in northern BC, which means no exports of our oil and gas out of northern BC, even if they are transported by rail. And they've refused to support the Energy East pipeline so far, even though most of the pipeline is already built, and it's primarily a matter of reversing the flow. My name is Garnet Genuis. I live in this riding. I grew up here. I'm going to be here and work here. I'm a proud husband and father. I'm an active member of various voluntary organizations. I have worked on Parliament Hill, so I know how to get things done in Ottawa. And most importantly, I will fight for this community. I will fight for our energy sector. I will fight for the infrastructure improvements we need and for the programs and regulatory environment that will ensure that we have jobs and opportunity in Fort Saskatchewan and Strathcona County for generations to come. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
So a lot of you may have seen my signs around town, and I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, what is a Libertarian Party? You're thinking, who is this person and what does he represent? So believe me, I wouldn't be offended if you asked me that, and I can certainly share those opinions. The first thing that I want to add is I want to talk about being a libertarian, and some would have you believe that it's like being a vegetarian. Well, it's not exactly. But it is similar in the fact that it's a belief system. The interesting part about talking to folks about libertarians is instead of me convincing them, they often discover their libertarianism themselves. It's not the same as calling yourself a conservative or an NDPer, a liberal. It's really a principle statement more than it is a political ideology. It's the notion that government cannot protect your liberties without also protecting your economic freedoms. Libertarians do not have to be members of the Libertarian Party. There are libertarians in conservative circles, in liberal supporters, And yes, even NDPers have libertarian-leaning views. Libertarians are not against all government regulation, as is a misconception. We understand that government regulation is necessary, but also feel it should be limited to ensure that free market can be free and equal, and environmental issues can stay at the forefront of industry innovation. That being said, libertarians are sometimes misunderstood as anarchists, believing in no government at all, which is just not the case. That would be like calling us liberals simply because the name sounds familiar. So we understand that you have to have a government, that it has to tax its base to provide for programs, and we feel that a federal government should have certain responsibilities, leaving internal regional matters to regional authorities, provinces, municipalities, to draft solutions that make sense to those areas. Not vast cookie-cutter policy that helps some at the hands of hurting others. Libertarians are community activists. A lot of us were previous Conservative Party supporters in our past lives, now distraught by their abandonment of conservative and reform values. In fact, the National Post recently defined us as the party the social conservatives will ensure the conservatives can never be. So we advocate for lower taxes. To be exact, it's 15% flat tax, with an increase in the current exemption from $11,000 to $17,300. So we don't believe in taxing those that make the least among us, as we don't agree that we should be penalizing those who work hard to provide for their families. We plan to make a university education more affordable, not by giving handouts, but by allowing students to keep their earnings tax-free to pay for the quality of education that they deserve. By taxing families less, we give them power to invest in their child's education and help them succeed. We feel property rights deserves a voice. Many Canadians are often surprised to learn that the right to property is not afforded the same constitutional protections that exist elsewhere in the free world. We believe legislation should reflect cooperation, negotiation, and compensation. Now, responsible gun owners, we believe, are not criminals. I do not accept a federal myth that gun regulation and public safety are related. There have been no links attributing regulation to changes in crime rates, and in fact, homicide rates have dropped in the US faster than here in Canada since the early 90s. During the days, the long gun registry, in the Liberal days, police found that only 1% of the seized long gun firearms from homicide scenes were actually registered. Now, we also fight for small business, recognizing that they represent 98% of all employer businesses in the country. That's half of the national workforce. That's 90% of our export trade, valued at $68 billion a year. They generate more than 3/4 of new jobs, yet sadly, their annual cost of regulation is $37 billion a year. That's up $5 billion from 2 years ago. So we strongly advocate for removing those unnecessary regulatory boundaries that allow businesses to invest, innovate, and grow. So in conclusion, I feel that community needs an alternative voice and someone who can stand up and defend small business owners and the rights to the taxpayer. I want to give you back more of your money. Thank you.
This election is about the future. And Albertans have always believed the future can be better. I was raised by my parents expecting me to get ahead, and I expect the same of my children. Except this time around, Mr. Harper is telling me no, that this is as good as it gets. Despite the fact that we are in a recession, we have the worst performing economy in the industrialized world. Alberta's unemployment is going to raise to almost 6% the next year, and our economy is contracting. It's going to go to minus 0.7%. So, we say no, it can get better. Albertans have always thought that way. If you stick with Mr. Harper, he's right, it won't, because it takes real experience and a real plan. What's my experience? Well, as the moderator said, I've lived in this community for over 45 years. I've volunteered at school councils at 3 different schools. I've coached pretty much, or volunteered at pretty much every minor sport. I was an incorporator of the Elk Island Schools Education Foundation. I have a business degree. My business degree has taught me the importance of building cases that make economic sense and that are sustainable. And as a lawyer, I've negotiated agreements on behalf of clients. I've represented them. I found out what their needs are. I think ahead for them. I've been handed files in the telecom industry to $1 billion in value. I'm telling you this not because I'm trying to toot my own horn. I'm telling it you because I can use my experience to be your representative in Ottawa, and all those skills are transferable over to being your MP. So, what's our experience with the Conservative Party? You know, we've been running Conservatives and Reformers out of here for 40 years. Well, Jim eloquently pointed out that our current MP is Mr. Invisible. You know, one of the elected officials in the fort told me she cannot get her MP on the telephone. That's being taken for granted, folks. But here's what's really startling. $500 million is taken out of this riding in federal taxes, more than comes back in federal spending every year. So that's $5,000 for everybody in this room, including your children, every year. You have a right to expect more. So the plan for the fort is that we subsidize the whole country. I'm telling you that that's not good enough. Now, we've listened to the people. We've been out door knocking. We know there's a lot of farmers here tonight, and we know how Mr. Harper and his government disrespected them by selling the wheat board. Your grain elevators, your grain cars, and your terminals were all sold. And who did he sell it to? He sold it to Saudi Arabia and the United States. Saudi Arabia happens to be the largest sponsor of state terrorism in the world. So he made a deal with the devil. He's fine doing that. He's always touting how he wants to fight terrorism, but he's fine to make a deal like that. We also spoke to the leaders at Sherritt and Dow, and we know how those leaders put a lot of energy and millions of dollars into making their plants ready for Kyoto. Mr. Harper took power, he ripped Kyoto up, accused the leaders at Sherritt and Dow that they take their plants to Alabama because they didn't want to be Kyoto compliant. He embarrassed the scientists there, he embarrassed the biologists there, he embarrassed the engineers there. So that's not something that I go along with. The experience of the Conservative Party has been debt, deficit, and Duffy, okay? $439 billion has been added to our national debt by the Conservatives, okay? They've run 6 deficits in a row, $20 billion average. And Mr. Duffy, and Senator Wallen, and Brazeau, and 55 others were appointed by Mr. Harper. He told he wasn't going to appoint any more senators. So, how about Mr. Mulcair? Is he a good alternative? Well, he's no friend of Alberta. He's no friend of the oil sands. He's no friend of free enterprise. Mr. Mulcair has to pander to his Quebec base. Okay, so I've been up here bashing. It's time for me to come up with a plan, and we have a plan. Our plan is to get the economy going. I'm not going to pretend like Garnet that everything's fine, that we can carry on at this pace. $3 billion tax cut, child benefit program that's richer and fairer to parents, 2% decrease in taxes for small business, no increase in corporate taxes, doubling the federal infrastructure budget. Our plan is to get the economy moving. When the Liberals were last in power, they ran 5 surpluses in a row. I also want to point, contrary to what Garnet's telling you, we defend the oil industry, we're here to promote it, we support projects like Keystone, but it's energy and the environment, not energy or the environment. Vote ROD on October 19th.
I'm running in this election for one simple reason. Like many Canadians, I'm currently taking care of my aging parents. In 2013, my mother returned home to our Sherwood Park neighborhood in the back of a police car, the first of several incidents. Her early onset Alzheimer's was progressing quickly, and she had unknowingly wandered onto our local golf course. Unexpected things happen to all of us in life, and when they do, we go through them as a family, but also as a community and a country. While we are fortunate to live in such a safe and caring neighborhood, we were unable to access the services we needed when we needed them. There were no spaces in local long-term care facilities that could provide her with the secure, safe, and around-the-clock care that she needed. I know many families in this riding and this room have had similar experiences. In Canada, the number of seniors over the age of 65 now exceeds the number of children under the age of 15. We are woefully unprepared to support our aging population and the future demands on our healthcare and our pension system. The Conservatives voted down a national dementia strategy in the House of Commons by one vote. They increased the old age security eligibility age from 65 to 67, and they left $36 billion on the line for healthcare by refusing to negotiate our 2014 healthcare accord. Who are we as a country if our seniors cannot retire with dignity? Although this is just one story, it's an illustration of how our government is not responding to the needs of Canadians. This election is about priorities. We know where the Conservatives and the Liberals' priorities lie. Let me tell you mine. As your NDP candidate, I have a different vision for our future here in Fort Saskatchewan. Good, stable jobs for families by refining and upgrading our bitumen locally, supporting our small businesses and diversifying our economy. A child care strategy that addresses issues with space, quality, and affordability, offering parents choice in how they would like to raise their children. A healthcare system that works for all of us through investments in family doctors, pharmacare for prescription drugs, home care, long-term care, and palliative care. To realize this vision, we need a strong, a stable, and a diversified economy. We must focus on growth, innovation, and a long-term vision for oil and gas and our other industries. Now tonight, Mr. Genuis will tell you repeatedly that he represents the only party that supports Alberta's oil sands and future pipeline projects. That is not true. It reflects the Conservatives' blatant oversimplification of energy issues. My family, like many families in this room, is connected to our local oil and gas industry. We know we can do better. Our livelihood depends on it. Stephen Harper hasn't succeeded in building 1 kilometer of Tidewater pipeline in the last 10 years. The NDP are prepared to support Energy East and Trans Mountain when we have confidence in our environmental assessment process and our ability to consult appropriately with First Nations. The Conservatives have failed us on all counts. Simply put, they're holding us back from pipeline progress. In my work on unemployment policy, I've seen the direct impact of the Conservatives' irresponsible treatment of our energy resources. Now, I've spoken with many workers here in Fort Saskatchewan who've recently lost their jobs. We know the importance of preserving good quality, value-added oil and gas jobs here at home rather than exporting them abroad. Our Canadian dollar is at an 11-year low, the Conservatives have run 6 consecutive deficits, and Joe Oliver and Jason Kenney refuse to name our current economic situation a recession. After Stephen Harper's lost decade, our unemployment numbers remain higher than before the 2008 recession. Job quality, which is the equally telling indicator of how our economy is doing, is at a 25-year low due to the rise of part-time, low-wage, and precarious work. Today, Stephen Harper concluded the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations, touting it as a good deal for Canadians. Is it a good deal when 20,000 automotive jobs are on the line or the livelihoods of our dairy and poultry farmers are in jeopardy? Is it a good deal when we favor the profit margins of pharmaceutical companies over the needs of families? The Conservatives' lack of transparency, accountability, and consultations with Canadians is reflective of their approach to leadership. You know what leadership we need? We need a member of Parliament and we need a government who stands with our First Nations, who stands with our families, who stands with our veterans, who stands with women, and who stands with all of us and represents us fairly and appropriately. Thank you.